The Alexander brothers' accuser was found dead last year, authorities say. Kate Whiteman's accusation of sexual assault against Oren and Alon Alexander opened a floodgate of similar allegations. Colin? Kate Whiteman, the Australian woman whose accusation of sexual assault against Oren and Alon Alexander opened the floodgates for dozens of similar allegations from women across the globe, was found dead near Sydney late last year. So this was in December. She was 45. Her death, which had not been previously reported, was confirmed late Wednesday night by a spokesman from the coroner at the Australian state of New South Wales. He also confirmed that the matter was under police investigation and that the coroner was awaiting an evidence brief from police. A cause of death had not been officially determined, the spokesman said, but investigations are prompted only when there's any doubt about whether the death was the result of natural causes. The New South Wales police declined to comment and referred to a reporter to the coroner's office. Shortly after the New York Times published the article about Miss Whiteman's death on Thursday, representatives of the defense team for the Alexander brothers reached out to the police in New South Wales. Just before midnight on Thursday evening, the spokesman for the New South Wales coroner's office provided an update to the Times that the office had looked further into the death and the police investigation was now concluded. The circumstances of Miss Whiteman's death were found to be non-suspicious. When asked to define what qualifies as non-suspicious, he said only that it meant there was no further concern about criminal activity. You wonder why no one believes a damn thing that the media has to say, or that it's not that everything is a conspiracy. It's that a conspiracy is just the truth before everyone else figures it out. Next article, Colin, please. Breaking. Miami's Alexander brothers named in newly released Epstein files. New Times identified at least 3 different instances across 2 Epstein files that name the Alexander brothers. Don't they just look lovely?
Aren't those a couple of nice little Jewish menschy boys right there? They're not really rapists. They're just men that were misunderstood.
Let's continue. After New Times reported Friday morning on a lawsuit filed January 22nd in the Southern District of Florida, alleging the Alexander brothers used a vast network, including a Miami nightclub, which I still can't find the name of, to sexually assault young women. Why don't you say young girls? Because a lot of them were as young as 13. The brothers once again drew negative attention. A separate release now links them to a much more powerful group, the 3 brothers, Alon, Oren, and Tal, who are currently facing federal sex trafficking charges in New York, are named in the Epstein files. On Friday, the DOJ released a trove of Epstein documents, 3.5 million pages in compliance to be exact, with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. New Times identified at least 3 different instances across 2 files that name the Alexander brothers. In one document, which no longer exists on the DOJ's website since it was posted this morning, the Child Exploitation Human Trafficking Task Force, a branch of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, appears to summarize complaints made against notable individuals, including the president, a former president, Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and the Alexander brothers. Boy, that's a who's who, isn't that? Attorneys for the Alexander brothers had not returned New Times' multiple phone requests to comment by the time of the publication. So who are the Alexander brothers? How did these guys get to be such powerful, sons of bitches. What are they on trial for? What are they accused of doing? And what have they been doing for many, many years? As Alexander brothers stand trial, new Epstein documents detail more alleged rapes. The Justice Department released a massive trove of Epstein-related documents Friday, one of which multiple alleged rapes at an Epstein party. Colin? Scroll.
So this one, I don't think will let me scroll because it was paywalled.
Well, what a surprise. But with that being said, let's show you exactly who these guys are. Now, I put together a compilation basically explaining who these, let's just say, they had a very big leg up from a very young age in the form of Ken Griffin, the billionaire investor.
A lot of times we hear and often are referred to as lucky, beginner's luck. But the fact is we've been doing this now for over a decade. And specifically in the last month, we've closed, 3 record-breaking transactions. We've been able to grow a network that's unprecedented.
Being a real estate broker, but particularly being a real estate broker on the very high end of the market in New York and South Florida, it must feel like the keys to the world sometimes. That's what it seems like when we talk to some of these people.
In New York and in Miami, real estate is a huge, huge business. And we're talking about like tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars that these people are bringing in.
Now, I want you to look at this shot right here of this screen. And what you're going to see here is a list of all of these heavy-duty monies that come in. But here's something that a lot of people may not know. If you're not following The Real Deal, that's a real estate investment Instagram page, website, etc. I have been featured on it a couple of times. I highly recommend following it because you'll get a real taste, especially from New York and Miami, which is predominantly what they cover, exactly what these brothers are all about, as they've been featured many times, along with many other Israelis who are involved in the commercial/luxury real estate world, which is where so much of this takes place. Ken Griffin christened these brothers when they were in their early 20s with a massive real estate deal. At the time was over $8 million. These are kids. But one has to ask themselves, why would they be given such a leg up on everybody else? What do they have that nobody else seems to have? Well, we're going to find out more.
Hundreds of millions of dollars that these people are bringing in. You hear the deals that they've been a part of, and it's working with influential people. That's the image that they have out in the world.
A red hot panel tonight. Let me tell you, Oren once sold the most expensive house in Miami's entire history, right? Some $47 million for one house.
They're making all this money and they don't necessarily have a boss. I mean, they do, but it's not really in the luxury real estate world. Like, money talks.
The real estate industry is kind of crazy. You are basically your own boss, and you're sold on this idea that you can build your own business, have flexible hours, like not really report to anybody. But it's very difficult. I mean, you're paycheck to paycheck. You're living off of these commissions. You're dealing with clients who are very demanding or will back out of a deal. That also creates a situation where bad actors can thrive.
Some of the things that like maybe a full employee would be subject to, like a little bit more scrutiny and oversight and those types of things, like isn't necessarily true in the brokerage world.
You can get away with things because you're not an employee of the company, you're a contractor. And a lot of these brokerages just want to look the other way.
Real estate brokers are set up to act particularly independently, and there are issues with regulation that I think everyone in every market could raise, but particularly when you add enormous wealth and just kind of these golden keys to society, that can really just change the game.
Now, let's be honest. They're reasonably attractive men. They obviously make a lot of money. They're very successful. They're very connected. But they also end up making a lot of money for a lot of other people. You see, it's one big cluster of a network. It's kind of like looking at somebody that is attractive like these men to somebody who is dog shit unattractive like Alan Dershowitz. And then you ask yourself, well, what's the connection here? If you are part of the Zionist Jewish network, as these men clearly are, it's not a question of whether they encourage rape, they condone rape. It's all about, kind of like the Catholic Church, turning their backs on the priests. Why is that? Because there's so much money and power involved that if they were to open up the floodgates, everything could come crashing down. Everything inevitably will come crashing down because the truth always will set us free. But in the case of these brothers, my guess is the reason they're going down is because somebody within that network has an axe to grind. Maybe they ended up raping somebody that they shouldn't have. That may have been part of a very powerful family, very connected. You know, eventually you step in shit and you can't get your way out of it. I hate that it is probably that way, but it's probably the only logical explanation. Or as some people have suggested, perhaps there's just moles within the organization who eventually just say, I can't take this anymore. And I want justice to be done. And if it costs me my money, my career, heck, even my life, I'm willing to take that risk. Somebody was clearly willing to take it, especially a lot of these victims. But remember, it has to be somebody within the legal infrastructure that can bring these men to justice. Right now, they're only on trial. The question is, will they actually be convicted? In lieu of what's coming out now, they're going to have a very hard time being able to bribe their way out of this one.
I reported a story on the underregulation of the industry and how bad actors can thrive in this environment. The process for seeking justice really is very difficult and oftentimes doesn't result in anything. What happens is these agents who are, maybe subject to this kind of abuse or ethical violation or breaking the law, they don't really have any options. For the most part, like a lot of these complaints that are filed to the state, if people even know that they can file complaints to the state, they take years, maybe they don't even result in a favorable outcome. And so it just allows kind of the situation to continue. It's more common than you think. And I think part of it is because of like the pressures that exist in the way the industry is set up.
The culture rewards making money and closing deals. And that's what's important. I think more people are paying attention to their relationship with their brokerage. More people are starting to question, like maybe agents should have more oversight. For the most part, that's how the industry operates.
And today we're talking about the hot luxury residential market. Oren Alexander.
I don't know if it's a uniquely like female experience. When I think to when I maybe heard early rumors about these guys, it was just sort of, they kind of go about their business and in a pretty specific way.
When we talk about rumors, I'll say that for me in New York, a lot of what I had heard was less about, what grew to be allegations, but a lot about business behavior.
It just seemed like they left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths.
What you have to remember about a lot of these guys in particular, especially somebody like this douchebag, there's a reason why people understand and identify with Christian Bale's Patrick Bateman character in American Psycho. On the surface, they can come off as charming, handsome, debonair, but behind the scenes, they're nutcases. Rapey, murderous nutcases. Hence why it's a film that really, it hit differently for a lot of people. And there's a reason why when people see these guys that they react a certain way. It's understandable because they give off that vibe in a big way. But a lot of people choose to ignore it because, again, when there's a lot of money and power involved, it becomes a lot easier to just push it off like it doesn't matter. Well, it's unfortunate, but this is, again, this is how so many victims just end up becoming, it becomes endless. A few turns into dozens, dozens turns into hundreds, eventually it becomes thousands because people keep their mouth shut. And in some ways, they're just as guilty as the ones who commit the act, especially if they know what's going on.
Which is not rare for a real estate broker. I think that kind of personality and being aggressive and burning bridges can work for a lot of people.
I had heard from other brokers in the city that they had a way of doing business that not everybody agreed with.
Very regularly, I think we would get tips about specific allegations that I remember kind of being more towards the end of sexual assault and having to do with alleged female victims.
Within a couple of years of covering this beat, I would hear rumors about something that may have happened in high school, possibly allegations of a sexual assault. Nothing ever came of the allegations at the time, so it wasn't a specific conversation that came up. It was, oh, did you hear about what may have happened in high school at a party? But you also heard so much about how agents didn't like them that it was hard to kind of figure out what was rumor and what was true.
We don't report on rumors. We hear a lot of rumors about people. The place that rumors have in our job is sort of a file away. It's something to keep in mind, and I think it's something to be aware of if you're hearing the same thing from multiple people, which still only amounts to a rumor, but it's significant.
What I had heard was, and what other people I think had heard, was that there was a party in high school. Oren and possibly Alon, who is his identical twin, were taking turns raping somebody. There was no record of it that we could find. I don't really know what else was out there.
Without really a lawsuit filed, there's not much more to go on. So really, I think that there were just a couple times it bubbled up to the amount that we believed that there was something solid enough we could find and hopefully kind of break through just conversations in New York and Miami circles.
When something like that is circulating, you want to make sure as a journalist that you are doing your due diligence and looking into it and trying to see if there's any truth to it. I had over the years been asked to look into it. I had heard from sources like you should ask around, try to find out what's been going on, but nobody ever came forward with allegations. And anybody who I spoke to didn't have specifics. And I think that that is probably something that came up with other journalists because these brothers, Oren and Tal Alexander, were smart at working with the media and they had relationships with reporters at top publications. And so they were great at getting publicity for their deals. That was.
And therein lies the rub. These men worked the gamut as well as anybody. They bribed people. They threatened people. Perhaps they removed people. Again, when you feel that you can't be touched, and especially if you have gotten away with this behavior for so long, why would anybody think otherwise? You know, everyone always said we were crazy for suggesting that perhaps things like Pizzagate and all of the spirit cooking stories and the like, perhaps not to the extent to which certain people describe them. But then when you hear the stories about, did Trump have an affair with Bill Clinton? Did George H.W. Bush rape a boy? Did they cut off the boy's limbs and eat them? Again, when you are at a level of society that very, and I mean very few people can see or touch, there's a lot of things people can get away with because they are above the law. The law, as Jen likes to point out, does not apply to people like these guys. Not just because they are connected to Israeli intelligence and the very vast luxury and commercial real estate network between New York and Miami that these guys revolve in. But you think they're the only ones? They're just the ones that got caught and probably were very egregious in their behavior. And so, as much as people want to get upset and ask, why isn't justice being done against men like this? Why have they been able to get away with this for so long? Why are there many that will still continue to get away with it? Well, it's pretty obvious. Because if you think that police are out to serve and protect people and not property, you're wrong. If you think ICE is really there to eliminate illegal immigration and not deal with the core problem, which is multinational corporations hiring people who are not legal citizens of this country for pennies on the dollar to screw us over. If you think that the reason why you can't afford a home is because of people moving into your neighborhood that you think are going to bring down the property value, when in reality, it's guys like this that manipulate the system that have been doing it for generations. Yes, it's all connected. It's a broken banking system. It's a broken economic system. It is a broken political system. It's a broken social system. You get wrapped up in very pointless, petty arguments about stupid nonsense. And all the while, these rapist bastards are running right to the bank with tens, if not hundreds of millions of ill-gotten dollars at your expense. The game is rigged. And these Israeli Zionist Jew bastards are a big part of why that is. So let's bring it all together. What to know about the Alexander brothers' sex trafficking trial. The men used their wealth and fame to lure women and then assault them, prosecutors say. The brothers have denied all allegations. Of course they have. See how long I have to. There you go. Come on. Come on. The Alexander brothers were once regulars in the Miami and Manhattan party circles, using their power, wealth, and fame to meet women, among other things. Now they are on trial in New York, accused of wide-ranging sex trafficking conspiracy that prosecutors say started almost 2 decades ago. Prosecutors say that from 2008 to 21, the brothers lured victims with social events as well as domestic and international travel, and then later raped and sexually assaulted them. Sometimes prosecutors say the women would be drugged before the attacks, of course. The trial, in which opening statements were given on January 27th, is expected to last for at least a month. Prosecutors are expected to call accusers, feds, and experts on drugs and memory loss to the witness stand. The brothers, Tal Alexander, and twins, Oren and Alan Alexander, Colin, please pay attention, have denied all allegations and have pleaded not guilty. If convicted, they could face life in prison. Fat chance. So who are they? 3 brothers grew up in Miami, more specifically North Miami Beach, moving in elite circles from a young age because of their parents, of course, Orly and Shlomo Alexander, who became millionaires after immigrating to the U.S. Remember, guys, what's the quickest way to become a millionaire in this country? Inherit it from your parents. Oren and Tal went into real estate, working together at the brokerage Douglas Eilman. In 2019, they made headlines after selling a $240 million penthouse to Ken Griffin, the most expensive sale in New York history at the time. How old were these guys at the time that they did this? How old? In their early 30s? Later in 2022, they founded a boutique luxury brokerage called Official. Their brother Alan worked as an executive with his family's private security company. Together, the 3 brothers were a fixture on the nightlife circuit and built a reputation as jet-setting bachelors. But rumors about the brothers followed them for years, dating back to their time in high school. Allegations became public when 2 women filed lawsuits against the twins, accusing them of sexual assault in the early 2010s. The Real Deal, a real estate trade publication, first reported on the lawsuits. Since then, at least 24 more civil suits have been filed. What criminal charges do they face? In December of 24, the brothers were arrested on federal charges at their homes in and near Miami Beach, and have been held without bail in federal detention center ever since. The brothers are charged in a 12-count indictment that includes conspiracy to commit sex trafficking by force, fraud or coercion, and inducement to travel to engage in unlawful sexual activity. Prosecutors argued in their opening statement that the brothers used things of value, trips, big houses, and exclusive parties to get women to places where they could rape them using force or using drugs. The indictment listed 8 victims, including 2 underage girls, which means they are children, though additional women were also expected to testify. Prosecutors have previously stated that they interviewed more than 60 women who have reported being raped or sexually assaulted by at least one of the brothers. So what's the defense's strategy? How do you talk your way out of this? Attorneys for the 3 brothers have argued in court and outside court that any relationships with women were always consensual, of course, and any accusations are part of an orchestrated campaign to tarnish their reputations to get money from them. The brothers are represented by high-profile defense lawyers from New York and Florida, Tenny Garagos and Mark Agnafilo, who both represented Sean Combs in his federal sex trafficking trial last year. The brothers have also retained Judah Engelmeyer, a high-stakes public relations strategist who previously represented Harvey Weinstein. Mr. Engelmeyer has argued that the brothers were mischarged. I'm not going to say they're the kindest, sweetest, and gentlest of Jewish boys, but I think the charge is not the right charge. They're not guilty of trafficking. Well, how could you make that assumption? The fact that they're directly connected to Epstein can only lead one to believe that there was a lot of trafficking going on. And perhaps going to the island is how they got away with so many of these crimes.